Hi there, this is Frits Rinker. I talk about the Roboeconomy, which is the economy that is powered 100% by renewables. And I constantly see information that is relevant for the fossil economy, and I see information that tells people that there's only one solution to solve all your problems, and that is to have a lot of money. And then this graph is presented, and somebody commented on this graph. It says there's no such thing as a low energy rich country. And then it shows you on the horizontal scale the GDP, so the cash flow in the country, that the amount of money that goes around. And on the left side, you see the energy use per capita. So the more energy intensive you are, and the more cash flow intensive you are, they think then that you're more rich. But this is, of course, baloney. What this skill simply shows is the mechanization of a country. So if you look at the left bottom, Burundi, which has per capita energy use that is below 500 kilowatt hours, which is still, it's still not zero, and a very low GDP, that simply means that there's very little scooters that use very little energy. There's little cars, there's little trains and planes that fly around in the country. There's little agricultural machines that use fossil fuels. There's little logistics from warehouses, from airports to warehouses to supermarkets or shopping malls, etc. That's what it means, and that the individual citizens in Burundi probably don't have a car or don't have a motorcycle or a scooter. It always starts with the scooters and then the SUVs or the pickups. And then if you go on the other extreme, let's say Luxembourg and Canada and Bahrain, Aruba, Austria, those countries, we say they're rich countries, but what it really means is that the people in those countries use machines, mechanized systems, and fossil fuels. That's, of course, the bottom line, fossil fuels a lot. So Luxembourg, if you live in Luxembourg, then then you're wealthy. You have a big house to heat. You have a car. You drive around. You fly. All the stuff that you eat comes from all over the world, because you go to the supermarket. You have shrimps. You have ananas. You have bananas. You have cacao. You have coffee. You have tea, which comes from China or some other place. And so everything you do is high energy intensive. There's a lot of people in Luxembourg that have that lifestyle. Almost everybody can go to the supermarket and buy whatever they want. I mean, what they need. But that is a lot of options that you have. And so the per capita energy expenditure is high and the GDP is high. But now, if you take a different approach, which is to say, well, okay, so I don't have a mechanized lifestyle. I don't use logistics. Can I be rich? And of course you can be rich then, because that's the way people used to live when they didn't have mechanized agriculture and they didn't have, let's say, tractors and trucks and all that stuff. Then you go back to, let's say, Germany in the mid 1800s, and that was an enormously rich country, where you have a lot of agriculture. If you go to Florence in Italy, you can see the cathedral they built in Florence, let's say centuries ago. It took 200 years, it took a while, but they did it. How did they do it? Well, there were rich people there, many of them. And why? And how much energy per expenditure per capita did they have? Near zero, because they were working, they were laboring themselves. They had fertile agricultural land around Florence, or around, let's say, all the major European cities. And I guess you can also say the American cities that were built in the last century before the fossil fuel boom, because the country is not started yesterday. It's already 500 years old or something like that. I mean, not the Indian part, but the European immigrants that went there. They built all those cities with sometimes, like the wooden Western cities where they have cattle ranches and all this stuff, the energy expenditure per person was near zero. So, and the cash flow was also very low, because, well, you had a couple of dollars to eat and that's it. So it's really, this graph really shows mechanization. And I think that if you want to have, let's say, if you are in these countries and you are on that graph, and then you have to wonder, okay, so now I spend for my 100 kilowatt hour per capita energy use, I spend, let's say, the higher that energy use is, the higher my cash flow is. And that's like one of the big realizations you should have, I think, about the economy. And that means, like, money is fossil credit. And I've been saying this for about 15 years now. But here in the graph, you can clearly see it, that, okay, so if there is more money flowing in the economy, then there's more energy use. How is that? Well, because the money buys the energy. So the money is flowing in order to make sure that the energy ends up with the owner of the money, whether it's gasoline in the gas station or energy that your house uses or the energy that's used in the airplane when you buy a ticket or whatever, if you're in a jacuzzi or all those things. And that is the necessary way the economy, and then I say the fossil economy works, is that the money helps bring the energy to the producers because it ends up with the producers. And then the producers have the money to buy the energy. Anyway, but that's like say, if you take the red line in the graph, then you should say, okay, how, and you want to fight climate change, then you have to say, can we be rich without the cash flow? And of course you can. That is, if you grow your food without fossil inputs, if you transport your food without fossil inputs, so electrical, if you mine electrical, if you do everything with renewable energy, then of course the cash flow is no longer tied to your energy use, because I can spend, if I spend €1,000 on solar panels now, I'll never have to buy electricity again. I cannot do it because I'm renting. But if I'm not renting, I own a house and I have a battery, then I basically don't have to buy electricity anymore, even in winter. If I have enough solar panels, then even in winter I have enough electricity. And then my cash flow is zero. So that's what I'm talking about, which is the Roboeconomy, which is basically a energy consumption per capita, which can vary from very little. If a person farms his own biological, let's say, produce, and farms enough to eat all year, and then trades some food for help with whatever other resources they need, and they say a medical care is somehow taken care of, because that's of course a modern thing that you don't have. Let's say that is very hard to integrate if you, let's say, at first sight. But if you are a biological farmer and you produce enough to trade, then you can simply trade it for healthcare, of course. The food that you produce, you can basically almost sell it to the hospital in return for your healthcare. But then your GDP can be near zero, or your personal GDP impact can be near zero. And that's why the Roboeconomy, and why renewables and batteries and solar power and wind farms and geothermal are all being retarded, being slowed down by the economy. And that's why these right-wing political parties all want to go ahead with nuclear, which nobody can do at home. So you will always have to pay for it, with fossil fuel, with drilling for oil, etc., etc., etc. Just go back. And how do they lure you into that vision, or how do they present themselves? As being rich, as being more wealthy. But that's not really the point of it. The point is that the banks that handle the money, in this case, they want more cash flow, because that gives them a cushy job and a lot of power, that gives them the control over society. They pay for the politicians to say things that will attract voters, and they have to say right-wing things, because that attracts the biggest group of lower, let's say, less educated and a little bit more ignorant voters, which are all right-wing. I mean, that's even scientifically proven that the right-wing voters and the Republicans in America are less intelligent than the Democrats. But it's more a matter of being antisocial by nature. You would not vote for any political party, but if there's a politician that starts to say antisocial things, then suddenly he has a lot of voters. So that's the trick. Right-wing is not the political story that they tell. Right-wing is pro-fossil. Right-wing is the fossil industry lobby that uses dumb ideas to get voters. That's why we have right-wing party in Holland, and that's why the VVD. Anyway, but long story short, if you look at this picture, you can see clearly that rich is equated to high fossil energy use, high mechanization. And why is that the way it is framed? Because banks made this picture or created this. And I traveled around in Asia, and you can see it happen. You can see people, let's say the people that don't have scooters, they're just like, there's social pressure, there's all these pressures. But if you go back to the farms where they grow their own food and they trade their food, and if you simply improve that process, improve the way people farm themselves, then they would all be happy and they would need very little money, and the social coherence would be great and it will all be fine. Instead of that, we have bank serving economies that are destroying the planet. So that's why I'm talking about this. But the roboeconomy and biological farms and the bioeconomy can help fix it, but we have to be really fast, and we have to understand this, that this is the way we are basically indoctrinated, that you're not rich if you don't use money. Well, that's bullshit.